The birth of my very first research paper of seizure risk Part 1, number 1602, April 19, 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, category, stroke and seizure, neurovascular stability. Preventive medicine. Preface, I had my first stroke on June 21, 2025. After being hospitalized at Stanford Hospital for 1 week, I was discharged on June 28, 2025. Immediately, I noticed that some of my memories, approximately 40% initially, both short-term and long-term, had been lost. I knew that the usual post-stroke recovery window is about 90 days. Therefore, I spent the next 3 months focusing on memory practice and cognitive recovery. As of now, April 19, 2026, my estimated memory loss is still around 10% by the 1st of October 2025. I began self-studying brain anatomy and learned that my hemorrhagic stroke near the pontine location is very dangerous. ND carries a very high mortality rate. I further learned that this location is closely linked with essential living functions, such as heartbeat, lung breathing, and food swallowing. But it has no clear connection with the multiple seizures that occurred during my stroke. Hospitalization period. In October 2025, I recalled topology I had studied in between 1967 and 1968. In December, I also remembered stochastic probability that I learned at UC Berkeley between 1979 and 1981. After briefly refreshing these two subjects through reading online available textbooks, I began applying both of them to my medical research work. So far, I have produced approximately 130 medical research papers using these two mathematical methods, which I originally learned 48 to 58 years ago but had never applied for nearly 5 to 6 decades. Through this process, I came to better understand the medical term neuroplasticity, which differs from the engineering term viscoplasticity or plasticity. Neuroplasticity describes the rebuilding and reconnection of neurons and neural pathways in my brain that were partially damaged by my recent stroke during the past 280 days. I have written 280 stroke-related research papers. By mid-February, after learning and understanding the cause and effect of my stroke incident, I started to self-study the subject of epilepsy, including seizures. I waited about 9 months before studying seizures because stroke is more immediately life-threatening, and I first wanted to understand how to prevent another stroke from occurring. That was my top priority. Seizure itself does not usually cause immediate loss of life. During the past 2 months, I have reviewed and learned a large amount of knowledge related to seizures and have written approximately 8,000 words of learning notes. These are not formal research papers, but personal study notes for record-keeping purposes. Today, I developed an idea to create a seizure risk equation of triggering sensitivity index TSI seizure, W. It will become my first research paper related to the subject of seizures. Introduction. This paper documents the birth of my very first research model for seizure risk. The word birth is intentionally chosen because this model did not emerge instantly as a finished equatio, and, instead, it developed gradually through observation, questioning, internal debate, comparison with prior mortality disease models, contradiction, and eventual simplification. My research method has always followed a physics and engineering still thinking process. 1. Observe the system. 3. Identify dominant variables. 3. Construct mathematical structure. 4. Compare predicted behavior with real-life trajectory. 5. Simplify until mathematics and reality become consistent. Therefore, the thinking pathway itself is part of the scientific learning and contribution. The development of this seizure model represents a continuation of my prior research work on stroke early RCH 2026, chronic kidney disease CKD, and cardiovascular disease CVD early April 2026. But it also introduces an important conceptual transition from structural failure analysis of stroke, similar to a blockaded or ruptured pipe, toward electrical instability analysis of epilepsy or seizures, similar to a short circuit in electrical wires. My preventive medicine practice as a closed-loop control system. I measure and calculate my TSI stroke values approximately 20 times per day. Whenever I observe either my glucose or blood pressure rising, I immediately make small adjustments to bring my TSI stroke value down, such as reducing my food portion, avoiding high carbohydrate and high sugar foods, taking a post-meal walk of about 4,000 steps, or performing intermittent breathing exercises consisting of inhaling for 4 seconds, followed by exhaling for seconds, repeated 4 to 5 times. My objective is not to achieve a perfect number, but to maintain my biomedical system within a stable operating region by keeping my TSI stroke value below 100, preferably between 85 and 95. No, I have been able to maintain my TS around 90 or lower on most days. From my perspective, this represents a practical implementation of preventive medicine. Instead of waiting for quarter laboratory tests or annual physical examinations, I continuously monitor key biovariables influencing my kidney, heart, and cerebrovascular condition and apply timely corrections when necessary. I treat my body as a dynamic biomedical system. I closely monitor 3 key biomarkers. Glucose represents my metabolic load. Specific blood pressure variables represent my mechanical vascular load. Pulse pressure PP equals SBP/dBP, which indicates vascular stiffness. And systolic blood pressure SBP, which represents the magnitude of the trigger for my stroke risk. When these 3 variables rise simultaneously, the combined stress applied to the vascular system for stroke risk not only increases, but is also amplified through the multiplicative interaction among these 3 inputs. By monitoring their interaction through TSI, I can detect early warning signals and intervene before the system enters a dangerous region. This process resembles a closed-loop control system commonly used in engineering applications. Measure the system state, detect deviation, apply correction, and restore stability. Small early corrections often prevent larger disturbances or damage later. In simple words, a small correction early often prevents large correction later. Traditional medicine often relies on snapshot laboratory values followed by diagnosis and treatment. My approach emphasizes longitudinal trajectory behaviors which include direction, trend, slope, and energy level. Trajectory behaviors provide more useful information than isolated data points. By maintaining TSI within a defined operating band, I attempt to prevent the biomedical system from entering a high-energy region where irreversible damage becomes more likely. This principle is applicable to heart attack, kidney failure, stroke, and seizure. TSI therefore functions as a navigation instrument rather than a diagnostic label. Measurement, interpretation, and intervention occur within the same individual. Response delay becomes minimal. Adjustments remain small, continuous, and gentle. The objective is stability, not perfection. Structural diseases driven by metabolic disorders. My previous research mainly focuses on mortality diseases strongly associated with metabolic disorders, such as cardiovascular disease, chronic kidney disease, and stroke. These diseases share a common underlying mechanism, the following for long-term metabolic imbalances gradually damage blood vessel structure. 1. Obesity increases body burden and long-term strain on the vascular system. High glucose damages the inner lining of blood vessels and increases vascular calcification. 3. High blood pressure continuously applies mechanical stress on vessel walls. Higher pulse pressure reduces vascular elasticity for abnormal lipids gradually form plaque deposits inside blood vessels. Over time, blood vessel walls become stiff and less flexible. Calcification may develop, and blood vessels gradually lose their ability to expand and contract normally. Eventually, structural damage can occur when the accumulated stress exceeds the tolerance of the vascular system. As a result, serious events such as heart attack, kidney failure, and stroke may occur. These processes are similar to fatigue behavior in engineering materials, where repeated stress gradually weakens structural strength until failure occurs. Therefore, cardiovascular disease, chronic kidney disease, and stroke can be viewed mainly as structural damage processes caused by long-term metabolic imbalance. Seizure appears fundamentally different. Seizure appears to follow a different mechanism. Instead of gradual trip to collapse, seizure behaves more like electrical instability. It resembles sudden abnormal synchronization of neuronals firing. This behavior is similar to runaway oscillation or short circuit in electrical networks. Electrical instability may remain silent for long periods. However, once system stability margin decreases below a critical level, instability may occur rapidly. Thus, cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, and stroke give structural fatigue problem, but seizure gives electrical instability problem. This observation suggests seizure risk may require different modeling structure. My initial 3-variable proposal. My initial approach was to extend the TSI structure by including sleep as an additional variable. TSI seizure equals 7 per sleep times E 100 times SBP 120 times amplifier coefficient variable appeared logically reasonable. Sleep represents the brain's recovery ability. Lack of sleep is known to Reduce the stability of brain activity. Insufficient sleep weakens the brain's ability to calm and regulate nerve signals. When this stabilizing effect becomes weaker, the probability of abnormal nerve firing, i.e. seizure, may increase. Ag represents metabolic load. Glucose affects how active and stable nerve cells behave. Long-term, high glucose can damage small blood vessels in the brain, as shown in my stroke case. SPP represents mechanical or blood flow load. Blood pressure affects how blood flows through the brain and also influences the stress applied to small blood vessels. Therefore, these three variables initially appeared reasonable. Recognition of double counting problem. Originally, I thought about using TSI stroke, glucose, and sleep hours as my three primary influential factors of TSI seizure. Further reflection this early morning revealed an important structural issue. Glucose and blood pressure are already major components inside TSI stroke. Including glucose again inside TSI seizure results in double counting of metabolic influence from glucose because the same factor appears twice in the equation. This violates independence principle of scientific modeling definition. Each variable should ideally represent new independent information, otherwise interpretation becomes distorted. Double counting also increases sensitivity of output excessively. This is part 1.